Okay, here we go. We got Shirley Jackson's The Lottery, and right here it says mood emat, but you're going to understand better why it says that. And we also have The Fall of the House of Usher. These two stories paired together are the perfect situation to discuss and examine a couple of key components of like meaning in literature. One of them being mood, M-O-O-D, which also a lot of times it has to do with something we call emotional effects. So being able to read well means like you can understand how and why and when authors make different choices to produce in you, the reader, some kind of emotional effect. The overall emotional effect of a story is called the mood. So the mood is how you, the reader, are supposed to feel. Is it funny, uplifting? Is it depressing? Is it like an adventure that makes you want to understand what's going to happen next? And are the good guys going to win? The bad guys win? All that's part of mood. An aspect of mood is tone. Tone really comes from a couple of different things. They establish the tone. The most important one is diction. Diction, when we say diction, what we're talking about are the specific word choices. So let me see if I can come up with an example from The Lottery for like diction. So I'm going to circle certain words that I feel like are like indicative of diction that could be establishing a certain tone. The other thing that's involved in establishing a tone is your syntax, the kinds of sentences. You know, this could be like, well, it's all questions. That kind of establishes like a tone where it's uncertain because they're all questions. Syntax, long sentences, short sentences, heavy duty, vocabulary. And then moods. Well, we could have a lot of different moods, couldn't we? We mentioned some of those. Moods, it could be depressing. Anything that you can feel as a human should be something that a story can make you feel if it's a good story. So it could be depressing, it could be uplifting, it could be funny or humorous. All of those things are possible. It could be inspirational, it could inspire you, it could horrify you. Those are just some of the, it's the range of mood and tone. A lot of times there's a relationship between the tone and the mood, but it's not always exactly what you might expect because we've got this thing called irony that's right above here. So over here we have irony, which complicates things in the relationship between the tone and the mood. And so I got two stories, one of them which has no irony between the tone and the mood. And irony is really like, and the biggest way to understand irony is it's a violation of expectations. So irony relies on, we have certain expectations. And so when those expectations are violated, expectations. Like, for example, if you are going to describe something that is horrible, you would expect that your tone might be kind of horrible. Like if you were going to explain a haunted house, you don't think it would have a funny tone. That's kind of what's happening in these two stories, The Lottery by Shirley Jackson and The Fall of the House of Usher. Shirley Jackson, let's see what kind of tone we've got here. So tone, we can read the tone over here. It's like, what are the words that give us a clue to the tone? So I'm going to circle my tone words in purple as I read this first paragraph. The morning, right, could have been nighttime, was clear and sunny. A lot of times the weather brings us our tone. The morning was clear and sunny with the fresh warmth of a full summer day. The flowers were blossoming profusely. The grass was richly green. The people of the village began to gather in the square between the post office and the bank around 10 o'clock. In some towns, there were so many people that the lottery took 2 days and had to be started on June 26th. But in this village, where there were only about 300 people, the whole lottery took less than 2 hours, so it could begin at 10 o'clock in the morning and be through in time to allow the village to get home for noon dinner. So this middle section here about the lottery, we don't really know what that is, so we have a question. You're reading, you're like, okay, there is a lottery that's happening, but we don't really know anything about it. But the tone in this first paragraph, we look at these tone words. Clear, sunny, fresh, warm, blossoming. It sounds like a very pleasant day. Sounds like a nice day. Nice, clear. So the tone is, I don't know, gentle. It is, let's see, let's read some more, see if we can get some more tone words. The children assembled first, of course. School was recently over for the summer, and the feeling of liberty sat uneasily. There's a little bit of a sat uneasily on most of them. They tended to gather quietly for a while before they broke into boisterous play. Boisterous is just a bunch of kids having fun. Boisterous play. So the tone shifts between paragraphs. So as you're reading a story, the tone moves. It can move in a positive or negative direction, or it can stay the same between paragraphs. But noticing for shifts, when it moves, it's called like a shift in tone. The tone has shifted to darker. Did it shift here to darker? I don't know. Uneasy is like a little bit, you might be like, I wonder why uneasily. Because that's, just look what is being said and how it's being said. The feeling of liberty sat uneasily on most of them. So maybe a little concern there. They didn't have to use that word uneasy. Uneasy means like you're nervous. But let's see if we see nervousness in the rest, or if that was just like a little bit of a blip. Boisterous play, and their talk was still of the classroom and the teacher, of books and reprimands. Bobby Martin had already stuffed his pockets full of stones, and the other boys soon followed his example, selecting the smoothest and roundest stone. We don't know why they're gathering those stones, but it doesn't seem to, seems like they're having some fun. Villagers eventually made a great pile of stones in one corner and square and guarded it against the raids of the other boys. The girls stood aside, talking amongst themselves, looking over their shoulders at the boys. It's kind of cute. Looking over their shoulders at the boys, and the very small children rolled in the dust or clung to the hands of their older brothers or sisters. Soon the men began to gather, surveying their own children, speaking of planting and rain, tractors and taxes. So it seems like everybody's doing their part in the community here. So what's the tone? I would almost say that it's definitely like outside, rural. What's an outside tone? So one of the things that we do for tones is we convert them into the most sophisticated version of that language. So instead of saying outside tone, we'd say pastoral. Pastoral tone, meaning it's like nature, outside, sunshine, rain, planting, crops, people playing in the village. That's kind of a pastoral tone. Well, we know that this story is going to end up with someone being basically murdered by all the people around them. And so here we have a tone that's kind of like easygoing, but we know that our final destination is really horrific. And that really is how irony operates, because we have a tone that would tell us we should expect one set of events, and we have an emotional effect at the end, which is very different. It's more like horror. So how different would the story have been if Shirley Jackson laid the groundwork for that early on? If she started the story with something that sounded a lot more like The Fall of the House of Usher. In The Fall of the House of Usher, we have a tone that matches the mood. The tone establishes the mood. There's no irony there at all. There might be irony in the story, but it's not in the relationship between the tone and the emotional effect or mood that the story is going for. During the whole of a dull, dark, and soundless day in the autumn. So the setting is, it's just right there. Here we have, so both of these stories are invented. She could have had any time of year. Sunny, summer, fresh, warm, full summer, There's nothing to be scared of. This is a beautiful summer day. Whereas Poe is saying, yeah, be scared. When the clouds hung oppressively low in the heavens, I had been passing alone on horseback through a singularly dreary tract of country, and at length found myself, as the shades of the evening drew on, within the view of the melancholy. So the other thing that you might want to ask yourself is, who is the narrator? Always like, whose story is this? So if you haven't, always, whose story? Because this narrator is the protagonist moving through this adventure. I paused to think. I encountered Roderick. I thought this about his condition. Who's the narrator here? The morning of June 27th was clear, sunny, with a fresh warmth. The children assembled. The men began to gather. So this that has a narrator that's third person. Which you'd say, like, well, third-person narrator, maybe a third-person narrator is not thinking about all these things. You know what I mean? Because here we have impressions that are driven by, well, who thinks the day was dull? Who thinks the day was dark? Who thinks that the clouds were oppressively low? The I thinks that. So this is like his perception of reality. Well, this narrator, does it have a point of view? It has a third person, so it's like, someone from above telling the story, but they're still making judgments on what they're seeing. Fresh warmth of a full summer day. Flowers were blossoming profusely, and the grass was richly green. Soon the men began to gather, surveying their own children, speaking of planting and rain and tractors and taxes. They stood together, away from the pile of stones in the corner, and their jokes were quiet, and they smiled rather than laughed. Quiet jokes, good community, just gathered around a pile of stones. What could possibly go wrong? It's just a pile of stones. And so it's kind of a setup. So the irony is a setup. And when we finally, at the very, very end, understand what's going on, it's like this tone becomes so creepy. Probably creepier than his tone. Because here there's no surprises. You know it's a haunted house. You know it's scary throughout. This is like when you have that realization of what those stones are for and what the lottery is for, the clash or the sudden awareness that nobody is even supposed to feel bad about this, because otherwise it would be in the tone. It's just, it is what it is. It's your tradition. Just how traditions work. We just do what we're supposed to do, and we play our part, and then someone is murdered in front of everyone with stones. It's no big deal. So your expectations have been violated. Hence the irony, which is always powerful. It doesn't always have to be funny. In this case, it really makes it horrifying. That's all I want to talk about for the lottery and for the fall of the House of Usher.